Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about small groups. This should help you with your study guide. On the other hand, I'm not going to spend much time with it though because really most of this comes directly from your textbook. That's going to be, let's get the chapter number right. It's going to be chapter 20 in the new edition, and then in older editions it's chapter 19, small groups. So, um, why talk about small groups? Well, think about it. In your time here in college, and then after, certainly in the workforce, you're going to spend a lot of time in small groups, small group meetings, small groups that have different tasks to accomplish, um, being them coming up with a report or coming up with a solution to a problem or something. Meetings, 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 meetings. Most meetings are small groups. Most small group meetings are supposed to have a task to do or a reason for being there. So many small groups are pretty dysfunctional. You may have had that experience already on campus, working with small student groups to accomplish projects or whatnot. So studying small groups, which is a whole academic area, and how they communicate, and then trying to sense how you should operate a small group, and then also being able to pinpoint problems as they occur and fix them perhaps could be very useful to you as a college student, and then also out in the workforce. So I think it's really worthwhile talking about small groups, reading about small groups. I think that this chapter has a lot of very useful advice that you could apply to so many situations. So I hope that you read this chapter. I actually hope you see this entire course as being useful material that you'll be able to apply to your life in college and certainly after college, public speaking in general and different kinds of public speaking. But I think we don't talk much about small groups or think about it much, but really it's critical to your life and a career and things after school. So I hope that you read through this chapter and try to take it seriously, the information here. So what about some of the vocabulary? Well, your textbook says, and I would agree, that every group needs leadership. It doesn't mean someone is chosen as a leader. There just is leadership. It could be leadership coming from a few different people, depending on what at the moment is happening. Or maybe most people in the group take on some part of the leadership and everyone kind of works together. On the other hand, there could be a designated leader. Imagine if in a small group in our class, I assigned your group a teaching assistant and said that teaching assistant was going to be the leader. Well, that would be it, I guess. Someone might challenge them in their leadership role, but in general, designated leaders that in your career, that's actually quite common. People may say that, oh, we're all going to work together, but probably there's a boss in the group. So how you work with a designated leader and try to sense what problems they have and things they're doing right and wrong and encourage them to do things properly, that depends on how well you understand small groups. More likely, you will end up with either an implied leader or an emergent leader, and those both any leader can have problems, actually. An implied leader is someone who you just look to leadership because they seem more experienced, maybe they're older, maybe they've been a designated leader before. Imagine if I assigned you a group project and I assigned every group a teaching assistant, but I did not say they were going to be the leader. Maybe you would just assume they would take a leadership role. Maybe they'd be the implied leader. Implied leader is not necessarily a good thing. Why have they become the implied leader? Is it because they truly have skills to be a good leader, or just because they happen to have done that before, or they seem to be older or something, or more mature, or maybe they are a bully and difficult and no one wants to challenge them. Then there's the emergent leader. The emergent leader just kind of rises to the top and assumes a leadership role by their force of personality, perhaps. Perhaps just because they're really good at it and they have some really good ideas, they seem to have a better sense of where the group is going. So there could be some really good things about being an emergent leader, but maybe they're doing it because they crave power and they want to take over. Or maybe in any of these cases, in all these cases, in all of our leaders and actually in our group members, we have to worry about hidden agendas. Hidden agendas. So maybe there's things that they want that they aren't telling you. Maybe they want to do this project and choose this topic because they've already done this topic before and they have all the materials ready. Maybe they want the group to choose a certain solution, and afterwards, when you're out in the working world, because maybe they've already worked with this vendor before. Maybe they even get a financial kickback or something. We have to really study groups, leaders in particular, and members in general, for hidden agendas. Why are they suggesting that solution or that course of action, or that we study this possibility? So what kinds of types of leadership do we have? If we're looking at leaders, how are we going to evaluate them? Well, your textbook talks about procedural, task, and maintenance. I think those are some very good categories, and honestly, I think that you should have a mix of those three things. No one of them is going to be sufficient. So in particular, I think you could have a procedural leader, and they would focus on procedural needs. A task leader would focus on task needs, and maintenance on maintenance needs, for instance. So what are the procedural needs, task needs, and maintenance needs? Well, you can read about those in your textbook. In general, here is what I think are the pros and cons of each of these categories. Let's take the middle one first, the task one, because that is trying to get you to complete the task. So you might think that would be the most important thing, and in some ways it is, right? Your group has a task. They are if you had a leader that was completely task oriented, that's all they would focus on is the task, and that's good if you are really just all about that. But think what could happen as a result. What if they focused on the task, but they jumped over other steps that were going to be needed to make that task defendable, right? What if they focused on the task so much so that they overworked their people, created a lot of resentment, didn't, were perhaps abusive in some way or something? So yes, I think of those three task needs are probably the most important, but they shouldn't be the only thing. Next, we have procedural and we have maintenance. Procedurals, people who are focused, leaders who really just become procedural leaders, just focused on that. They just want to check the boxes. They just want to show that everyone's there. Everyone completed certain tasks, not completed them so much as just fulfilled the discussion of them, perhaps. They are setting the agendas. They are perhaps taking the notes. They're making sure that everybody was assigned something, but are they really checking up on it? Did everything really happen? Did anything really get done? They might create a lot of wordy stuff in a report, but is it actually useful information? I don't know. Probably not. So it is important that we have somebody who keeps things organized. But if all we have is organization and we don't have substance, then we have a procedural leader. And if someone is completely focused on maintenance, just cares about how everybody gets along. They're the one who bring the cake or the donuts to the meeting. They just want to talk about everyone's family and personal lives. They want everyone to be comfortable, and that's all important. They want to end the meeting early because they know that people have other things they need to do, but they're not oriented to the task. They're just oriented to maintenance of the group and keeping everybody working well together. But of course, not a whole lot of work gets done. So think about those three things and how they work together when you analyze a leader. Okay, the reflective thinking model, which I always think should be called reflexive, but I guess it's not. It's reflective thinking model. The thing about the reflective thinking model is that it flows very nicely into, I think, into persuasive presentations, even though it wasn't set up that way in the textbook and so on. It's a way of organizing a problem-solving group. You can read in your textbook that it comes from John Dewey. It's a step-by-step process. It's the steps are pretty easy to understand. I think there are some of these steps that we don't take that seriously in some groups. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You should read about this in detail. Yes, we define the problem. I think many times in groups we don't spend much time actually defining a problem. We just sort of assume that everybody knows what we have to fix. Let's really analyze, well, first of all, even before we analyze, let's really define the problem to begin with. You know, what is the problem? And then we need to analyze it. Analyzing a problem is going to take research. That's the part of that step that we often skip, is the research part. We got to really understand the problem, the history of the problem, the data behind the problem, do research. And then really most likely the area we skip is the criteria for solutions. In other words, it isn't just, everybody wants to skip to the possible solutions, but how are we going to analyze these solutions, right? What is going to be the criteria for a proper outcome? How are we going to judge these solutions? What are the standards that we're going to use for that? So it isn't just to say we're going to get a solution, but what does that solution need to do, and how are we going to judge whether that actually is what it's doing, right? So we establish a criteria for solutions. Then the step that everybody wants to jump to in the very beginning is generating solutions. Again, though, generating solutions should have research behind it. When we look at how maybe other people have tried these solutions, other places, things that work better or poorly, problems that we could avoid, we generate these possible solutions. And then we have to use the criteria that we established to select the best solution. So on the first glance, these things look really too obvious, but then if you look through them, you could think the ways that they could, there could be some problems in them, some shortcomings, some things that we sometimes skip, or we just take too much for granted when we should stop and really work through them in our group. Now, think about this as a persuasion now. Wouldn't this be the same thing? Imagine I'm trying to persuade you to change a behavior, right? I'm going to first define the problem. Yeah, I think this is the problem. And I'm going to work through the problem and with research and show you how, what the problem really is made of, how serious it is, why you should care. That's analyzing the problem. Then I'm going to establish a criteria. I'm going to for solutions. I'm going to say, if we could solve this problem, these are the things we want these solutions to do. Right? Good. Then I'm going to say, hey, I've got some solutions that could do those things. And here's what they are. And then I could say, of these, here's the thing I think is the best possible solution. So I think you could use the reflective thinking model as the foundation for a persuasive presentation, or a persuasive essay for that matter, or anything else that's persuasive. And in fact, you're going to see some similarities between this and Monroe's motivated sequence, which we'll get to in another video lecture, which will be right after this one.